She was just walking her son home from practice. No cameras, no crowds, just a quiet mom in a t-shirt and a 10-year-old boy with a soccer ball under one arm. But then came the two men, loud, mocking, looking for someone to shove around. And when they laid hands on her, she didn't even raise a hand when the man slapped her right there in broad daylight with her 10-year-old son watching. And when the crowd gasped, when the boy cried out and clutched her side, she didn't retaliate. She just whispered two words to her son. Stand behind me. Because the men who thought she was just a quiet mom, who laughed when she didn't fight back, had no idea who they were touching. But when she moved, when her hands did what only trained operators know how to do, that's when the crowd found out. Now, before we show you exactly how it unfolded, and the moment they finally realized his mother was a Navy SEAL. Drop a comment telling us where in the world you're watching from. Tap like, hit subscribe, and turn on the bell icon, because what they started, she finished. The parking lot outside Fairview Plaza always smelled like cut grass and engine heat around this time of day. School was out, parents were off base, and the late afternoon sun angled low across windshields and chain stores. Not the kind of place you'd expect anything sharp to happen. Lieutenant Commander Sienna Maddox stepped out of the dry cleaners with a folded uniform bag over her shoulder and her son's hoodie clutched in her other hand. She wore civilian cargo pants, a faded navy blue t-shirt tucked at the waist, and mirrored sunglasses that did half the talking for her. Her son Theo skipped 2 steps ahead, a soccer ball tucked under his arm and grass stains still smudged across his shin. You said we could get a smoothie after, he said without turning. You say that like I forgot, Sienna replied, catching up with a half smile. But you also said you wouldn't slide tackle during recess today. He turned, grinning. It wasn't a real slide, just a controlled deceleration. That's not a word a 10-year-old should use after falling on concrete. They crossed toward the Strip's Corner smoothie shop, passing a line of parked cars and a couple of teenage skateboarders weaving in and out of cart returns, the kind of slow, drifting rhythm every base-adjacent suburb settled into between 1600 and dinner hour. Nothing urgent, nothing dangerous. And yet, without seeming to look, Sienna's eyes swept the area. Her pace adjusted a fraction as they moved between shadow and sun. She noted the skateboarders, noticed the van with blackout tints still running near the end of the lot, noticed the man arguing with someone on speakerphone 3 stores down, and, just as quickly, dismissed each one with the calm discipline of muscle memory. Theo didn't notice. He was mid-sentence about his school's science fair when he paused to adjust the laces on his sneaker. Sienna instinctively reached her arm out to guide him back toward her side. Nothing dramatic, just protective placement. Subtle, constant, like she was always tracking vectors even in peacetime. The smoothie shop door was propped open with a painted rock. A chalkboard sign advertised a mango special with too many exclamation points. Inside, there were 3 families ahead of them. A girl in braces asked for oat milk. A father in uniform gave his toddler the last sip of strawberry banana. Go grab a table by the window, Sienna said, brushing Theo's shoulder. He took off toward the corner booth. She stayed behind to order. As she waited in line, a voice caught her attention behind her, sharp, dismissive, young. Move it, lady. Sienna shifted to the side calmly, not responding. Just enough to let 2 young men, early 20s, baseball caps low, walk past with swagger and cheap cologne. They didn't look at her again, but one of them muttered something under his breath, followed by a short laugh. She didn't react, didn't even blink. But she did glance, just once, toward her son at the booth, still smiling, still safe. Sienna turned back toward the counter and waited, because this afternoon was supposed to be normal, but something in her gut had just shifted. And if there was one thing she'd learned in years of combat, convoy rides, and hostile terrain, it was the difference between noise and threat. And this wasn't noise. Outside the smoothie shop, the sun had dropped just enough to sharpen shadows beneath the awnings and make everyone squint as they stepped out. Sienna held both drinks, one mango strawberry, one plain banana with oat milk, and was scanning the sidewalk when she saw Theo standing by the corner of the plaza, back to the wall, clutching the soccer ball tighter than usual. She moved fast, but not rushed. Training didn't let her do anything with panic. As she approached, she heard it. "Hey, tough guy," one of them was saying. "You think being a little mama's boy gets you out of saying excuse me?" Two young men stood between Theo and the rest of the sidewalk. Both were in their early 20s, baggy hoodies, mirrored sunglasses, sneakers too clean to have ever touched gravel. Not in uniform, not local either, judging by the accent, but full of something close to a dare. Sienna stepped forward, placed the smoothies on the concrete bench beside the planter box, and inserted herself between her son and the two men without saying a word. Theo didn't say anything either, but his eyes locked on hers. She didn't kneel, didn't hug him, just a hand placed lightly on his shoulder, anchoring him. The taller of the two men leaned his weight from one foot to the other, smirking. "We just said watch it, lady. Your kid nearly rolled into us like a stray." Sienna spoke calmly. "He's 10. You're 20. Adjust your posture accordingly." The second man, wiry and shorter, laughed like it was a bar joke. "Ah, now she's giving orders." Sienna didn't move. "No, I'm giving you an out." They looked at each other, half smirking, then glanced at Theo, who still hadn't moved. "Kid looks scared," the tall one said. "He's not," she replied, "but he's about to learn what a bad decision looks like from 6 feet away." The shorter one stepped forward, not with purpose, but with the swagger of someone used to bluffing. "Or what? You gonna call your husband?" Sienna's voice didn't rise. It didn't need to. "He doesn't take these calls anymore," she said, "but I do." That made them pause, half a beat. But that was the danger with cowards who performed confidence. They often couldn't tell when the tide turned until it was pulling them under. Tall guy scoffed and turned to Theo. "Maybe next time you say sorry, kid." He reached forward, maybe to pat his head, maybe to tap the ball. That was the first time Theo flinched. Sienna stepped between the hand and her son so fast that the man barely registered it. "Back off," she said flatly. The shift was microscopic. Only posture. Her shoulders squared, her head tilted 5 degrees to the left, her heels aligned beneath her like a platform, but it was enough for someone watching. An older man sitting near the bakery had been watching since the beginning. He put down his coffee. The two men didn't move yet. They were still playing. Theo looked up. "Mom." Sienna didn't look down, didn't break eye contact. "Stand behind me," she said. "Not loud, not angry, just final." And in that moment, the balance of the street changed. The crowd didn't know why, but the men were about to find out. The plaza had gone quiet in the way public places do when something tense begins to take shape, but no one knows how it will end. A stroller wheel squeaked somewhere behind the smoothie shop. A shopping cart clanged against a curb. Even the skateboarders had stopped, boards tipped on their sides, eyes half fixed on the slow-moving confrontation. The taller man shifted his weight, amused now, emboldened by the still attention gathering at the edges of the sidewalk. He angled his chin downward, looking at Sienna the way someone looks at a problem they think is harmless. "You're real serious for someone blocking a sidewalk," he said. "Let your kid talk for himself." "He doesn't need to," she replied evenly, "and neither do you." The wiry one snorted. "You hear that?" She thinks she's in charge. Theo tightened his grip on the soccer ball until the seams creaked. His shoulders had pulled inward, chin dipping, but his eyes hadn't left his mother. He knew her stances, knew that stillness. He'd seen it before, once when a stranger yelled at her in a grocery store, another time when a dog lunged too fast toward him at the park. But he'd never seen what stood in front of them now. The taller man stepped forward again, closer this time. His voice dropped, still cocky, but threaded with something defensive. "You want respect?" he said. "Start by teaching your kid to watch where he's going." Sienna didn't engage the insult. Instead, she looked at Theo briefly. Her eyes softened just enough for him to read what he needed. It wasn't fear, it was instruction. Then she turned back to the man. "You have two options," she said simply. "You leave, or you apologize." The wiry one scoffed. "Or you what?" That's when the taller man reached forward again, not carefully this time. His fingers brushed Theo's shoulder with casual entitlement, the kind people use when they want to remind someone they're not afraid. Theo instinctively stepped back. Sienna moved. One hand caught the man's wrist just long enough to halt the momentum. Not twisting, not striking, just enough to interrupt it. But the interruption was all the permission he needed to escalate. "Don't touch me," he snapped, jerking his arm back. The slap was sharp, open-palmed, driven by frustration and ego more than strength. It cracked across the side of her face. Everything froze. A collective breath pulled from the sidewalk. Someone gasped. A woman near the bakery covered her mouth. The skateboarders straightened instinctively. Theo cried out, "Mom!" But Sienna didn't stumble, didn't blink. Her head turned only slightly from the impact, a faint red shadow rising where his hand had landed. She didn't raise her voice, didn't rush forward, didn't change her tone. She stepped half a pace toward her son and placed her hand gently on the top of his shoulder, anchoring him behind her frame. "Stay behind me," she said, not louder than before, just more precise. The two men grinned with nervous bravado, mistaking stillness for surrender. "See," the taller one said, turning slightly, as if addressing imaginary applause. "Just a little reminder, that's all." The wiry one laughed. "Guess you'll think twice now, right?" Sienna said nothing. Her posture shifted subtly. Shoulders relaxed, chin leveled. Hands eased to her sides, weight settling into her heels with deliberate balance. But Theo noticed. He saw the way her eyes changed, the way her jaw aligned, and for the first time in his life, something clicked inside him. His mother wasn't confused. She wasn't afraid. She was calculating, and everyone watching could feel it, even if they didn't understand it yet. The moment after the slap stretched long and thin, as if the entire plaza waited for a storm that hadn't announced itself. But it wasn't a storm. It was something quieter, something exact. And the men standing in front of them were about to realize why her silence wasn't weakness. For a few suspended seconds, no one moved. The breeze barely touched the leaves above the plaza awning. A pigeon fluttered off a rooftop gutter and landed somewhere distant. The only sound was Theo's breathing, quick and shallow, tucked behind his mother like a shadow. The two men still wore their smirks, but they were shrinking. Not obvious, not retreating, just unsure. The slap had been their high ground, and they hadn't expected it to be quiet up there. Around them, the bystanders weren't just watching anymore. They were holding phones now, not raised, not yet recording, but unlocked, ready. A woman murmured to her partner, "Should we call someone?" "Call who?" he replied. "I think she's about to handle it." Behind the bench near the smoothie shop, the older man from earlier, a retired chief if the posture said anything, adjusted his ball cap and leaned forward just slightly. He wasn't intervening. He was observing, closely. The taller man took another step back, as if stretching his arms, playing casual. "You gonna say something, lady?" he asked. Sienna's eyes didn't move. Her breathing had changed, not louder, not faster, just deeper, diaphragm level, regulated. The kind of breath a sniper takes before a shot. The kind a diver uses when seconds matter. Theo noticed. He watched the line of her shoulders relax, not slouch, just uncoil, as if she was letting go of something no one else could see. The wiry one squinted at her. "What, are you, like, in yoga or something?" She blinked once. Slow. "You don't want to know," she said. He scoffed again, louder now, trying to perform bravery in a crowd that was no longer laughing. "Try something then, come on. You want to stand there like you're made of steel? Let's see it." The taller man chimed in, voice tightening. "Yeah, you think you're untouchable because everyone's watching? Hit me back, go ahead." Sienna didn't respond. She didn't move toward them, but she wasn't standing still either. Her feet shifted minutely. Her weight angled. Her hips drew in half a degree, a dozen microscopic adjustments that no civilian would clock, but anyone trained would recognize immediately. Theo felt it. She didn't have to say a word. He stepped back half a pace on instinct, holding the ball with both hands now like it might anchor him. He wasn't scared of her. He was in awe of her. "Mom," he whispered. She tilted her head just enough for her voice to reach him without anyone else hearing. "Eyes open," she said. "Don't look away." It wasn't a lesson. It was permission. At the edge of the crowd, a man in uniform, base security, or maybe off duty, had quietly stepped forward. He wasn't speaking either, but he was watching her stance now, his head cocked the way soldiers do when they're reading terrain. The taller man shook his head, trying to dispel the weird weight in the air. "This is stupid," he muttered. "She's not going to do anything." The wiry one looked back toward Sienna, voice louder, almost mocking. "You're all posture, lady. You don't scare anyone." That was the moment the final signal shifted. Not for them, for everyone else. Because no one watching believed that anymore. The taller one moved first. Because cowards always moved when they thought they still had the upper hand. He reached again, not for the boy this time, but for her shoulder. A show of dominance, the kind meant to press a point. To remind the crowd that the earlier slap hadn't drawn blood. His fingers were halfway to contact. When she broke his stance, no warning, no pause, Sienna pivoted her body just enough to redirect his center of gravity, trapping his arm with a controlled pivot step, using his own momentum to send him twisting hard onto the concrete. His body slapped the ground louder than his hand ever had. Gasps rippled outward. One woman shrieked. Before his partner could react, her stance had shifted again. 2 steps forward, forearm aligned to centerline, intercepting his instinctive swing. She blocked, redirected, and used a low sweeping step to unbalance him. He stumbled backward into the curb, landing hard on his elbow with a yelp. Neither man was injured, but neither could stand without reassessing everything they thought they knew about the woman in front of them. Sienna didn't advance. She didn't posture. She stood between them and her son, calm, level, breathing steady. The taller one groaned and rolled onto his side. "What the hell?" She cut him off with 3 words. "You're done here." The wiry one started to rise again, face flushed with a mix of pain and confusion. "You think you can just—" She didn't let him finish. "Step back." Her voice wasn't loud, but it was final. It stopped him faster than a siren. All around, phones were filming now. The crowd had formed a loose semicircle. Mothers with strollers, teenagers frozen mid-sip. A barista from the smoothie shop half out the door with a hand over his apron. Not one of them looked amused, because what they'd just seen didn't match what they expected. The older man near the bench finally stood, arms crossed. "Well now," he said under his breath. "That wasn't amateur." The 2 downed men sat dazed on the concrete, blinking up at the sky as if the sun had betrayed them. They weren't talking anymore. Sienna adjusted her weight, eyes scanning the area, calculating risks. Her pulse remained low. Her stance was still textbook neutral. Behind her, Theo hadn't moved, but he was no longer afraid. His small voice broke the silence, barely above a whisper. "Mom, where did you learn that?" She turned her head slightly, just enough to make eye contact. "At work." A couple in the back of the crowd chuckled, unsure if it was safe to laugh. The wiry man tried again to rise, this time with less anger, more disbelief. "You crazy or something?" Sienna didn't look at him, but her voice reached him like a command still ringing from a chain of custody. "Try anything else, and the next thing you'll feel is regret, not pain." It was the way she said it that stopped him, not as a threat, as a promise. He dropped his weight back onto the curb and looked away. The crowd was no longer watching the 2 men. They were watching her, not for drama, for proof, and she gave them none. No smile, no smirk, no glory. She simply stepped back to her son, reached for the smoothie cup on the bench, and handed it to him. Theo took it with both hands. Still cold, he said, like it mattered somehow. Sienna nodded. That's because I moved quickly. And somewhere behind them, the taller one finally realized she hadn't fought back. She had controlled everything from the start. It took nearly 30 seconds before anyone in the crowd spoke again. And when they did, it wasn't loud. A man in a gray Marines t-shirt, leaning against a lamppost, nodded slowly, almost to himself. Then he said it, not to the men on the ground, not even to Sienna, but out loud enough for the air to hear. That's not just anybody. She's Navy SEAL. It wasn't a guess. It was recognition. The kind that didn't come from YouTube or rumor. He'd seen that kind of movement before. Maybe in training, maybe deployed, maybe from the women who had to be twice as precise to be seen half as competent. But when he said it, no one in the crowd questioned him, because deep down, they already knew. Sienna hadn't defended herself. She had controlled the entire situation with surgical restraint, and now the silence wasn't confused. It was reverent. The wiry man was still sitting on the curb, his hoodie pulled halfway off like he couldn't decide whether he wanted to look bigger or disappear. The taller one was quiet now, kneeling, rubbing his ribs without looking at her. They knew. Even if they didn't know the word for it yet, they knew. Theo stood beside his mother now, eyes fixed on the crowd. People weren't staring anymore. They were just adjusting, recalculating who she really was. Is it true? He asked softly. What that guy said? Sienna didn't answer right away. She took a slow breath, watching as a mother ushered her daughter away toward the car, whispering something the child would remember in years to come. Finally, Sienna looked down at her son. Her voice was quieter than it had been all afternoon. Yes. Theo stared. You're a Navy SEAL? I was. For how long? A while. His mouth opened like he might ask more, but the words got stuck somewhere between amazement and something deeper. He looked back toward the two men, now completely sidelined, the performance gone out of them. They hit you, he said. She nodded once. They made a mistake. He hesitated. You could have done worse to them. I could have, she said. But then I wouldn't be your mother. I'd just be someone who fights. Theo looked down at his smoothie, then up again. You didn't fight back. I didn't have to, she replied. Because I wasn't there to win. Then what? She looked at him evenly. To teach. Across the sidewalk, the older man in the Marine shirt stepped forward. He raised 2 fingers to his brow in a crisp, silent salute. Nothing exaggerated, just 2 people who understood the weight behind it. Sienna returned a subtle nod, not out of pride, but out of respect. The crowd began to disperse naturally, like a tide pulling back after a surge. No one clapped, no one made noise, but no one forgot. And the 2 men who had once stood tall in mockery now sat quietly in their own silence. They didn't ask for help, didn't demand an apology, because the look on Sienna's face told them they were lucky the lesson had come with restraint and not regret. The police cruiser pulled in with its lights flashing, but no siren, tires crunching slowly over the plaza's red brick loop. It wasn't called by Sienna, nor by any member of the crowd, just a clerk from the neighboring pharmacy who had seen the shove, heard the slap, and decided to call it in without waiting to see how it ended. 2 officers stepped out, standard suburban precinct blues, not military. 1 male, 1 female. Alert, but not aggressive. Their eyes scanned the area, first toward the 2 men still sitting on the curb, then toward Sienna, standing calmly beside her son, who hadn't let go of the smoothie. What happened here? The male officer asked. Sienna didn't answer first. It was the man in the Marine shirt. Ma'am de-escalated a situation, he said, gesturing toward the downed pair. These 2 made contact with her son. She stepped in. They escalated. She responded precisely. The female officer looked from him to Sienna. You're the one who was struck? Sienna gave a single nod. Any injuries? No. The taller man on the ground grunted. She threw me. On concrete. The Marine laughed softly. No, son. You threw yourself. She just let gravity finish the job. The officers approached Sienna and Theo. "Ma'am, we'll need your name for the record," the female officer said gently. "Witnesses already said you didn't provoke anything, but..." Sienna produced her ID without a word, handed it over. The officer glanced down. Her eyebrows lifted slightly. "Lieutenant Commander?" she asked. "Retired active, Special Operations Group, local residents on base?" The other officer blinked. "You're Navy SEAL?" Sienna nodded once. "Former." They both looked at each other. Then back at the men on the curb. The wiry one tried to speak. "She didn't say that up front." "Shouldn't have needed to," the Marine muttered behind them. The officers moved methodically now. Statements were taken. Several bystanders stepped forward, offering brief but unified summaries of what had happened. No exaggeration, just facts. She warned them, gave them chances. They touched her son first. She didn't start it. One woman handed over a video file, already airdropped to her phone. The male officer turned back toward Sienna as the scene settled. "Do you wish to press charges?" Sienna looked down at Theo. His eyes had steadied, the earlier fear replaced by something deeper. Understanding. She looked back at the officer. "No," she said. "I don't need them charged. I need them to remember." The officers paused. Then the female one said, "Understood." Theo tugged at his mother's shirt. Why not? She knelt for the first time all afternoon, one knee on the pavement, eyes level with her son. "Because if they ever try this again," she said softly, "with someone who can't stop them, there won't be a lesson left to learn." Theo nodded slowly. She stood again, tall, composed, untouched. The taller man looked up at her now, not angry, not defensive, just aware. For the first time that day, he seemed to recognize who he'd been speaking to. The Marine approached quietly and offered Sienna a folded slip of paper. "What's this?" she asked. "Local Veteran Resource Council? We do community outreach. If you ever want to speak at the school or mentor, we'd be proud to have you." She accepted it with a nod. "I'll think about it." The officers walked the two men over to the cruiser, not in cuffs, but with a silence that didn't need steel to feel like consequence. As they pulled away, the small crowd fully dispersed, and the plaza returned to its normal hum. Only now it carried a different tone, quieter, more alert, because they'd just seen something rare. Not force, not revenge, control. The plaza had mostly emptied by the time Sienna and Theo began walking again. No one stopped them. No one asked questions, and yet every passerby offered a subtle nod, one of those rare acknowledgments between strangers who had just witnessed something they didn't quite have the words for. Theo stayed close at her side, holding his smoothie in one hand, soccer ball tucked under the other arm. His walk was slower now, not tired, not scared, just thoughtful. They didn't talk at first. Sienna didn't fill the silence. She never had. She walked the way she fought, measured, alert, present. Theo finally broke the quiet. "Why didn't you tell me before?" She didn't ask what he meant. She knew. "That I was a SEAL?" she asked. He nodded. "Or that you could do all that? The fighting, the calm, everything." She gave a faint smile without looking down. "Because it's not who I am all the time. It's just what I've trained to do when it's necessary." "But that guy hit you." "I've been hit before," she said. "Didn't it make you mad?" Sienna took a breath, then answered carefully. "It made me alert. That's not the same as angry." Theo looked down. I thought you'd hit him back right away." "I could have," she said, "but then he wouldn't have learned anything. And neither would you." Theo looked up at her, his eyes clearer than they'd been all day. "You weren't trying to win." "No," she said. "I was trying to show you what not to become." They walked past the empty bench where the smoothies had first been set down. The sun had dipped behind the far roofline now, casting long shadows down the side of the strip. Sienna adjusted her pace so Theo stayed just ahead, subtly watching the way he carried himself. He didn't look shaken. He looked older. They reached the car and Sienna unlocked it with a chirp of the fob. She opened the back door for him, waited as he slid in, then handed him the last of the napkins from her pocket. He wiped his hands, then leaned forward as she closed the door. Before she got in the driver's seat, he spoke again. "Are you going to tell anyone?" She paused with one hand on the door handle. "No," she said, "but I think they already did." The smile that crossed his face wasn't wide, but it was the kind that lasted. Because for the first time in his life, he understood something most kids don't until much later. His mother wasn't just the one who packed his lunches, signed his permission slips, and told him to wear his helmet. She was someone people underestimated. Once, and never again. Sienna slid into the driver's seat, checked the mirror, and started the engine. As they pulled out of the plaza, the last thing she saw was the man in the marine shirt still standing outside the bakery, watching them leave. He didn't wave, but he nodded once. So did she. And then she drove on. Would you have stayed calm if someone laid hands on you, right in front of your own child? Do you think true strength is shown through control or retaliation? Drop your answers in the comments. I read every single one. And if this story reminded you what real discipline looks like, go ahead and tap that like button. Make sure you're subscribed with the bell icon turned on so you never miss a mission. Share this video with someone who still thinks silence means surrender. And while you're here, don't leave just yet. Our next operation's already on your screen. Watch it now, and I'll see you tomorrow. Same time, same place.